I missed the last train at 11:52 p.m. on a Thursday, and I spent the rest of my life trying to figure out if that was luck or something crueler, pretending to be luck. My name is Elliot Reyes. I was 34 years old that night. I worked as an architectural surveyor, which mostly meant measuring buildings that were about to be torn down, and feeling, in some tired corner of myself, that I was doing the same thing to my own life. I had a small apartment uptown, a lease with 4 months left on it, and a habit of catching the 11:52 northbound out of Meridian Station because it was quieter than the rush hour trains and because no one tried to make conversation with you after midnight. I want you to understand the smallness of what happened that evening. There was no heroism. There was not even a decision, not really. Not the kind people underline later in journals as a turning point. There was a woman on a bench, crying so quietly that if I had walked 2 feet to the left, I would have missed her entirely. That is the whole story of my pivot. 2 feet, 1 glance. A second of hesitation that used to be a thing I was quietly proud of in myself. She wore a brown wool coat that was too warm for October, and a suitcase tipped on its side at her feet. She was not sobbing. She was doing the other kind of crying, the kind that comes out of people when the thing they are crying about is too large to perform. I set my bag down. I said very stupidly, "Ma'am, are you all right?" And she looked up at me with an expression I have thought about 1,000 times since. It was not grief. Grief is softer. This was something that had not yet agreed to be grief. It was still a question she was asking the world. "My husband," she said. "They called from St. Agnes. There's been some kind of—" She stopped. She did not have the word. I waited for the word. Behind me, I heard the pneumatic sigh of the 11:52 closing its doors. I turned my head maybe an inch. I saw the yellow stripe along the side of the car slide forward. I saw the conductor in the window, looking not at the platform, but down at his phone, his mouth slightly open. And I remember thinking that was strange, because conductors are supposed to look at platforms. Then the train was gone, and the tunnel wind pulled at my coat, and the woman was still looking up at me. "I'm Elliot," I said. "Nora," she said. "Nora Halberstam." The station went very quiet in the way only underground stations can go quiet, as if the building itself were holding its breath between trains. The digital board above our heads flickered and showed the next northbound at 12:34. 42 minutes. I had 42 minutes to stand in a half-lit station with a stranger who had just received a phone call she did not yet have a word for, and I decided. No, I did not decide. I simply sat down on the bench next to her. That is the part I keep coming back to. Not the train I missed. The bench I sat on. How I leaned my bag against my knee and told Nora, a complete stranger, that I was in no hurry, which was the first true thing I had said out loud that week. How the ceiling panels hummed, and one of them pulsed in a pattern I could not quite find the rhythm of. How the station attendant in his glass booth, Hassan, I would learn his name was Hassan, lifted his head and looked at us. And in that moment, he looked exactly like a man who had heard something on his radio that he did not understand. I remember all of this. I have to remember all of this, because somewhere north of us, the train I did not catch was already doing what I would not know about for another 40 minutes. The first one I saw was across the tracks on the eastbound platform. He was walking wrong. I want to be precise about this because my mind has edited it 100 times since, and I want the original footage back. The platform opposite ours was separated from us by 4 parallel rails, by the brass-capped third rail I'd been taught since childhood to fear, and by a distance of maybe 60 feet. The lighting over there was worse than ours. 2 of the overhead panels were out. And that is probably why it took me 3 full seconds to understand what I was looking at. He was a man in a green work jacket. He was walking the length of the opposite platform with his head lowered and his mouth open, and his left arm held in front of him the way a person holds a glass of water they do not want to spill. Except his hand was empty, and his walk was not a walk. It was the motion of a person trying to remember how legs worked, compiling the process one joint at a time. He moved 3 feet, stopped, shuddered, moved 4 feet. At the far end of his platform, he turned without turning, a kind of sideways drift, and began the same strange progress back in the other direction. "Nora," I said very quietly, "don't look across." She looked across. People always look across. It is almost a reflex, a defense. If something is worth not looking at, the body wants to know why. "Oh," she said. Just that one word. Behind us, Hassan's radio crackled clearly for the first time all night, and a woman's voice said, very calmly, as if reading a weather report, "Repeat. All northbound service suspended. All northbound service suspended. Travelers are advised to seek shelter in place and await further." And then the static ate her again. A woman in heels came down the escalator with the crisp, annoyed stride of someone who had missed a train on purpose so she could be furious about it later. She stopped 3 feet from the platform edge, looked at the board, and said, "Are you kidding me?" loudly enough that her voice slapped off the tile. She carried a leather briefcase, a phone pressed to her ear, and the posture of a person used to being agreed with. Her name, I would learn in a minute, was Diane Koval, and she was a litigator for a firm whose name I had seen on the sides of buses. "No, I'm telling you, I've been on the platform for 5 minutes. There is no train." She noticed us. Her voice dropped half a register. "Hold on." She lowered the phone. "Is there a problem with the line?" "We don't know yet," I said. "Has anyone asked?" Nora said, without looking up. "The man in the booth is trying." Diane's eyes flicked to Hassan, and the frown she made was not unkind, only tired. She walked to the glass. I heard her knock. Hassan did not look up. She knocked again, sharper, and then I heard her go still in the way people go still when they realize the animal in front of them is not ignoring them, but is, in fact, frightened. She came back to the bench slowly. She sat on the far end, 2 people away from me. She put her phone face down on her thigh. "He's calling dispatch," she said. "Dispatch is not answering." A 4th person arrived. He came down the stairs, not the escalator, carrying a skateboard under one arm, the wheels still spinning lazily from the descent. He had a hood up and white earbuds and the loose floating gait of kids who had learned to own rooms by pretending they did not care about them. He pulled one earbud out as he reached the platform. "Yo," he said to no one in particular. "Why is there no train?" "There is no train," Diane said. He nodded as if that answered something. His name, he would soon tell us like it was a password, was Theo. Theo set his skateboard down, kicked it into a slow roll, and coasted to the edge of the platform. He peered down into the tunnel with the casual curiosity of a boy who had never been taught to be afraid of dark places. "Can I ask you," he said, still looking into the tunnel, "does it usually sound like that down there?" I was already rising. There was a noise from the tunnel. Not a train, not wind, a dragging. Something soft being pulled over something rough. And beneath it, farther in, a voice that was trying to be a voice and not managing it. Theo stepped back from the edge. His face had changed. He was not floating anymore. Hassan's booth door opened. He came out fast, a radio still in his hand, the coil of its cord trailing behind him like a leash. He said, first in English and then in Turkish and then in English again, "Everybody away from the tracks. Everybody away from the tracks. From the service entrance near the vending machines, An old man staggered into the light. His shirt was the white of a shirt that used to be white. His mouth was wrong. Not open exactly, but unlatched. As if the hinge of his jaw had given up on being a hinge. A dark stripe ran from under his left ear down into his collar. He did not see us at first. He walked into the edge of a bench and bent around it with the patient, unsurprised slowness of a man pushing a shopping cart through a narrow aisle. Hassan held his arms out wide and stepped in front of us. "Sir," he said, in the tone you use for someone you're not sure is going to answer. "Sir, can you hear me?" The old man lifted his head. The thing in his eyes was not attention. It was recognition without memory, the way a thermostat recognizes heat. He came toward Hassan in a small, shuffling burst. Theo was the one who moved. I will never stop being grateful for that. He swung the skateboard off the ground, held it by the trucks, and brought it sideways into the old man's knees with a flat, ugly crack of wood meeting bone. The old man went down. He did not cry out. He did not flinch. He began, immediately, and with the same indifferent patience, to try to stand again. "Run," Hassan said. "Go, go, go." We went. Nora was slower than all of us, and I took her elbow without thinking, and Diane took her other elbow without being asked. And the four of us made for the escalator while Hassan stayed behind, his radio forgotten on the tile, his arms out. I looked back once. I want to say I did not, but I looked back once. Hassan was between us and the old man, stepping sideways, herding him the way you herd a loose dog. The old man bit him. He bit Hassan in the soft meat between thumb and wrist. Hassan made a sound that was less pain than disbelief. And then he shoved, and the old man went down again. And Hassan was already moving, already behind us on the escalator, his hand pressed against his wrist and a line of bright blood ribboning down his forearm. "Keep going," he said. "Keep going, keep going." We rose up the motionless escalator into the main concourse, and the concourse was not empty. There were people. A woman on the floor with her back against a pillar. A man beating on the locked doors of a coffee kiosk. A family. Mother, father, two small children in pajamas, huddled near the information booth, as if the information booth still had information. The big departures board above the central hall had gone dark, except for one amber word: delayed. Somewhere, a security siren was not wailing, so much as clearing its throat, pulsing in slow, bored waves. Hassan leaned against the wall and looked down at his wrist. His lips moved in a language I did not know. Theo stood next to him, still holding the skateboard, and did not let go of it for the rest of that night. The concourse smelled of spilled coffee and the electric scorch of overloaded wiring. Someone had broken the glass on one of the kiosks. Someone else had dragged a wheeled bag across the marble and left a long black streak, as if the floor itself had been scored. Above us, the departures board kept its single amber verdict like a cowardly oracle. Delayed, delayed, delayed. Diane moved first. She always moved first. She had the trial lawyer's instinct for silence. When it fell, she filled it. And she walked to the family at the information booth, with her hands held low and open. "We need to get off the ground floor," she said kindly, in a voice I had not heard her use on her phone. "My name is Diane. Can you walk with us?" The father nodded. He looked at me over Diane's shoulder, and I could see he was measuring. Not me exactly, but my being here, the fact that other adults existed in this hour. His wife was holding one of the children tight against her ribs. The child was not crying, which somehow was worse. Her name was Rita, his was Vincent, and their girls were Sophie, 6, and Mira, 3. Vincent's left hand had a wedding band, and the knuckles of it were white. I never saw that hand unclench. "There's a hotel across the sky bridge," came a new voice from behind the shoe shine stand. "Meridian Grand. Private security, back stairwells, a generator. Better than here." The man who stepped out was in his 50s, wearing a maintenance uniform with his name stitched over the breast. Price, M. He had a heavy utility belt, a flashlight the size of a baton, and the flat, preserved calm of a man who had seen emergencies other than this one. He did not look afraid. He did not even look surprised. He looked like someone who had been waiting for years, for a reason to be the person he believed himself to be. "I'm Marco," he said. "I've worked this station 14 years. That sky bridge on level 2 connects to the Meridian Grand. I can get us there." "And then?" Diane said. Marco shrugged. "Then we see." Hassan sat down on the floor with his back to the wall. He had tied a handkerchief around his wrist, but the cloth had already bloomed through. Nora knelt beside him without a word and took his other hand in both of hers. She did not try to say anything. She had already learned, earlier that night, that there were calls for which no words yet existed. Theo crouched by Hassan's other side. "Hey, man," he said. "Hey, what's your name?" "Hassan." "Hassan. Cool. I'm Theo." "You're going to be fine, Hassan." Hassan smiled at him. It was a terrible smile, patient and kind, and it was the smile of a man who knew the boy was lying and loved him anyway, for trying. Above us, the TV screens bolted over the ticket counters had switched from the usual silent loop of tourism ads to a news feed. No one had turned them on. They had simply, at some point, started broadcasting a different thing. The ticker along the bottom ran in a language of fragmented panic. Major metro areas. Unconfirmed. St. Agnes Hospital. Marshall. Remain. Remain in place. And behind the ticker, aerial footage of a city I did not recognize, burning at its edges, while a voiceover I could not hear explained whatever could not be explained. "We don't have long," Marco said. He said it without drama, as if he were announcing a platform change. "Once they come up those stairs, we aren't going anywhere on foot. That sky bridge is our only window." "Hassan can't," Theo began. "Hassan walks with us," I said, before anyone else could say anything. "Hassan walks with us, or we don't go." Marco looked at me for the first time. He looked at me for a long second. Then he nodded once, slowly, the way a man nods at a term he has not agreed to, but has decided not to argue about yet. "Up," he said. "Now." The sky bridge was a long glass throat that bent sideways over 8th Street. On an ordinary night, I had crossed it a dozen times on the way to the cheap bookstore on the far side. That night, every pane of it was an aquarium, showing us a city that had not yet realized what was happening to it. Headlights still moved in the avenues below, still obeyed lanes, still stopped at red lights, as if the order of things were a law of physics rather than a promise we had all been mutually agreeing to uphold. Hassan was walking between Nora and me. His steps had begun to soften. He was not limping, but the rhythm of his feet had lost precision. Twice he stopped and leaned a palm against the glass, and then pushed off again. "I am fine," he said each time, before any of us could ask. Marco was ahead of us. He moved at a constant pace that none of us could match without hurrying. And I understood that this was a choice on his part. That he was telling us with his legs what he was not willing to say with his mouth. We can walk at the speed of the slowest of us, or we can walk at the speed of survival. But we cannot walk at both. Halfway across the sky bridge, Hassan sat down on the floor. Not fell, sat, as if he had come to a park bench. "My dear friends," he said. A moment. Nora knelt. Theo knelt. Diane pressed 2 fingers to the side of his neck and then looked at me. and in her face I read the thing none of us were yet saying. "Hassan," Nora said. "Hassan, look at me." He looked at her. His eyes were bright and wet and entirely his own. "Tell me about your family." He smiled. "My wife is Daphne. My son is Elias. He is 11. He plays the... He made a small shape in the air with his good hand. "Strings, music." "Violin," Nora said. "Violin? Yes, he is very bad at it." Nora laughed. It was the first laugh I had heard in an hour, and it was the laugh of a woman who was laughing for another human being and not for herself. "My son was very bad at the clarinet." "Was?" "He is 50 now. He is still very bad at the clarinet." Hassan laughed. Then he did not. Then his eyes did something. It was not dramatic. It was not a flicker. It was just a slow release, as if a hand had let go of a rope and the rope had, finally, gone slack. His head tilted forward onto his chest. His breathing changed shape. "Back up," Marco said, from 20 feet ahead of us. He had not turned around. He was watching the far end of the sky bridge. He had heard the change without seeing it. "Marco, no," Theo said. No, he's just..." "Back up, son." Hassan raised his head. The brightness in his eyes was gone. What was there instead was the thing I had seen in the old man in the station. The thermostat look. Attention without memory. He opened his mouth. There was no recognition in the opening. Nora moved before Marco did. She put her hand flat against Hassan's chest, and she said very clearly, "Hassan, Ruh isinde huzur bul," which I learned later meant, "find peace in your soul." And then Marco was there, between her and what had been Hassan. And I will not write what he did with the flashlight. I will write that he did it once, and that it was enough. And that he did it with the economy of a man closing a door he had closed many times before, in some prior life I would never ask about. When Marco straightened, he was breathing hard. He did not look at any of us. He wiped the flashlight on the hem of his shirt. "We go," he said. We went. No one spoke for the rest of the sky bridge. Nora walked with her arms crossed tight around her ribs. Theo kept his skateboard pressed flat against his stomach like a shield. Diane had taken off her heels and was carrying them in one hand, and the sound of her stockinged feet on the carpet was the loudest sound I had ever heard her make. Rita held both her daughter's hands, one in each of hers, and Vincent walked backwards behind them, staring at the long tube of glass we had left, as if he suspected the dead might develop opinions about sky bridges. The doors at the far end led us into the mezzanine of the Meridian Grand. Someone had locked the lobby elevators down and taped a piece of printer paper to the central one. Use stairs. A chandelier the size of a compact car hung above a marble rotunda that had, on any other night, reflected the well-bred murmurs of business travelers and the soft percussion of rolling luggage. Tonight the rotunda was occupied by 3 people, and all 3 of them were watching us come through the door with the cautious, evaluating stillness of deer who had not yet decided whether the noise in the woods was a predator or a friend. The tallest of them stepped forward. He was in his 60s, in a dove-gray suit, with the grave posture of a man who had spent his life being the person other people looked at when something went wrong in a hotel. His name was Mr. Calderon. He had been the night manager of the Meridian Grand for 21 years. He told us so in the first 30 seconds after we walked in. "We have power," he said. "We have water. We have food for perhaps 4 days, if we are careful. We have 1 service elevator operational, and we have a generator on the roof. What we do not have..." His eyes went past us, to the sky bridge, to the city beyond it. "Is any working information about what is happening out there. So we will share what we know. and you will share what you know, and we will decide together what to do next. Marco said. Who locked down the lobby? I did. Good. Behind Mr. Calderon, the other two had not moved. One was a woman in her 30s, sitting on the edge of a velvet bench, her hands folded in her lap in a way that looked less like composure than like the last stage of someone trying not to fly apart. Her face was extraordinarily still. The other was a man in a police uniform, sitting on the floor with his back against a pillar, his duty belt unfastened and lying across his thighs. He had not looked up when we came in. He was rocking very slightly, back and forth, 6 inches each way, and his lips were moving around nothing. Officer Rios, Mr. Calderon said. His voice when he said it was gentle, the way a doctor's is gentle. Officer Rios came to us from the 8th Precinct. He okay? Marco said. He will be. Mr. Calderon did not look at Marco when he said it. The woman on the bench finally lifted her head. Her name was Alida Park. She would tell me later, sitting on the roof at 3 in the morning, that her sister had been in the subway tunnel between Franklin and Maple when the first screaming began, and that Alida had been on the phone with her, and that she had heard her sister's phone hit the floor. For now she only said, Is anyone else with you? No, Nora said. This is all of us. Alida closed her eyes and opened them again. And in that small motion, she seemed to rearrange some interior expectation. Mr. Calderon clapped his hands, softly, a single gentle sound, the way a maitre d' might bring a room back to its purpose. Then let us pool our knowledge, he said. There are couches, there is coffee. I do not know how much longer there will be coffee. Let us use it while there is. We sat. What we learned in the next hour, pieced together from Mr. Calderon's television, from Alida's phone, which still had reception in bursts, from Marco's radio handset that squawked in corrupted fragments, and from the occasional thing Officer Rios said without looking up, was a picture no one of us could have drawn alone. The outbreak had started at St. Agnes Hospital at approximately 9:24 that evening. No one could say what had started it. The hospital's surveillance footage had leaked into social media in a clip 12 seconds long, shaky, vertical, and it showed an emergency room triage nurse stepping back from a patient and saying, audibly, "Sir, please sit down, sir, please." And then the clip ended. By 10, 3 patients had been transferred from St. Agnes to Mercy General, and one of those patients had turned in the ambulance en route. By 10:30, both hospitals were closed. By 11, the precincts had stopped responding to non-emergency calls. By 11:40, Rios's partner had called him from the plaza outside St. Agnes and said the word Rios could not stop saying now, quietly to himself, with his hands on the duty belt. Everywhere, everywhere, everywhere. The bite, we understood, was the vector. So was a scratch if it broke the skin. So was the spray of blood into the eye or the mouth. Time to turn was not consistent. Hassan had taken maybe 40 minutes. Alida's sister, who had been bitten at 11:18, had gone silent on the phone at 11:29. Mr. Calderon had already written this all down on a piece of hotel stationery in small, precise handwriting under the header, Observations. He also had a list on a separate sheet under the header Assets and a third list under the header Decisions. The decisions list was empty. We should be on the roof, Marco said. Line of sight. We see them before they see us. We should be in the basement, Rita said. They don't go down. Everything I've ever read says they don't go down. They're not in a book, Diane said, not unkindly. They're out there. And nobody here has read the book they're in. They go everywhere, Rios said from the floor. He did not lift his head. Everywhere. Sophie, 6 years old, walked over and sat down next to him. She did not touch him. She just sat at his side, cross-legged, her hands folded in her lap, in a perfect miniature of Alida's earlier posture, as if grief were a pose one generation taught another without meaning to. After a moment, Rios turned his head and looked at her. He did not say anything, but his rocking slowed. "I'll propose this," Mr. Calderon said. "Tonight, we sleep in shifts on the mezzanine. We block the sky bridge door. We block the service entrance. At first light, we assess. If the streets are quiet, we consider the river. The Meridian has a 12-passenger hotel shuttle in the basement garage. It has a full tank. It is," he paused, "large enough for all of us. We counted. Elliot, Nora, Diane, Theo, Marco, Mr. Calderon, Aleida, Rios, Rita, Vincent, Sophie, Mira. 12. Marco's face did something very small. I watched it do the thing. And I watched him choose not to say what he had almost said. And I had understood in that moment that Marco had done the arithmetic before we had, and that the answer he had gotten was not the same answer Mr. Calderon had gotten. 12 is tight, Marco said finally. 12 is what we have, Mr. Calderon said. Nora took my wrist then. Her hand was very cold. She did not say anything. She did not have to. She had felt the current under Marco's voice, the same undertow I had felt. And she was reminding me of something I had not yet admitted I knew. Outside, in the street below the Meridian Grand, a single unanswered car alarm ran its full looped complaint and then went silent. No one came to turn it off. We began to move furniture. We barricaded the sky bridge door with a rolling luggage cart weighted with 4 cases of mineral water. We pushed the velvet banquette against the service entrance. Marco wedged a fire axe into the slot between the elevator doors, so no one, living or otherwise, could pry them open from inside the shaft. He did all of this without asking permission from anyone. He did all of it with the brisk, untalkative competence of a man who had held jobs where incompetence got people killed. And I found myself, against my will, beginning to trust his hands, even as I was learning not to trust his mouth. Diane and I took the first watch. We sat on the marble rim of a decorative planter that held a fig tree neither of us believed was real. Nora slept on a chaise, curled tight, her breathing uneven. Theo sat cross-legged on the floor beside her, with his skateboard across his lap like a cat. And he did not sleep. And he did not speak. And every so often, he would reach up and adjust the blanket someone had draped over Nora's shoulder. "What do you do?" Diane said after a long time. She did not look at me. "For work, I mean. I measure buildings that are about to be torn down." She almost laughed. "Jesus. What do you do?" "I sue people." "Who?" "Usually hospitals." I looked at her. She kept her eyes on the fig tree. "Malpractice?" "I represent hospitals against malpractice claims." She said it very flatly, without the polished pride I'd heard in her courtroom voice on the phone. I was in court on Tuesday arguing that a surgeon who left a sponge in a woman's abdomen for 14 months was not technically acting outside the standard of care. I won. I got a call at 7 tonight that my bonus would reflect it. "Is that why you were on the 1152? "I was on the 1152, she said. "Because if I went home, my husband was going to ask me how my day had been. And I did not have an answer that would not end the marriage." I didn't say anything. "Elliot," she said, "if we get out of here, if we actually get out of here, I'm going to do something very different with the next part of my life." And I wanted to say that out loud to another human being, so that later, when I'm tempted not to, a person will exist who remembers that I said it. I'll remember. Thank you. Across the rotunda, Xay Rios had fallen asleep sitting up. Sophia had fallen asleep beside him. Their heads had, at some point during the last hour, tipped toward each other and come to rest in a way that suggested the two of them had made an unspoken agreement. Marco came up the stairs from the basement garage at 3:12 in the morning. He walked across the marble without hurrying. He stopped in front of Diane and me and spoke low. "Shuttle is fine. Full tank. Tires sound. One problem." "What?" "The garage exit is a chain gate. You have to open it by hand. Whoever opens it cannot be in the shuttle." Diane and I looked at each other. "Somebody has to stay outside long enough to get the gate up, latch it, and run," Marco said. "If the street's not clear by then, they don't make the shuttle." "Who?" Diane said. "I'll do it," Marco said. "I know the latch." It was the first decent thing I had heard him say. I almost thanked him. Then he said the next sentence. "But if I'm the one doing the gate, someone in the shuttle's got to decide when to go. And they have to be willing to go without me, if it comes to that." Diane closed her eyes. "Marco." "Just saying it out loud," Marco said, "so a person exists who remembers I said it." He went back down the stairs. The fig tree did not move. I did not believe it was real. The breach came at 4:07 in the morning. I know the exact time because the digital clock on the reception desk was the last thing the lobby chandelier illuminated before the power cut. It came through the service entrance, which should have been impossible. Marco had wedged it with a banquette and a fire extinguisher and 2 luggage carts, and the door opened inward, which meant that nothing on the other side should have been able to shoulder it open. What Marco had not accounted for, what none of us had accounted for, because none of us had yet understood what we were dealing with, was that the thing on the other side of the door was not one body. It was a pressure. The building next to the Meridian Grand had emptied its lower floors in the direction of the nearest light source, which was our lobby. And the service entrance had held against 1 body, and 2, and 6, and 12. And then it had not. It came open not with a crash, but with the groaning, gradual capitulation of a thing being pushed, and pushed, and pushed. The banquette slid. The fire extinguisher fell. The luggage carts rolled backwards into the rotunda as the door opened wider and wider, and through the widening gap came an arm, and then a shoulder, and then a face I did not recognize and would not remember. "Up, up, up," Mr. Calderon said. He did not shout. He spoke at conversational volume in the way men of a certain professional discipline had learned never to raise their voices during emergencies, because raising the voice made things worse. "Everyone, to the stairs. To the stairs now." Rita had Mira on her hip and Sophie by the wrist before the sentence ended. Vincent put his body between his family and the service entrance and walked backward, staring, his knuckles still white. Elida had Rios by the elbow and was half dragging him toward the stairwell. And he was moving now. He was moving. Something inside him had reconnected when the door began to open. Mr. Calderon did not come with us. Mr. Calderon walked toward the service entrance. "Mr. Calderon," Diane said. "Mr. Calderon." "I have keys," he said over his shoulder. "I have keys they do not have." He pulled the ring from his belt as he walked, and on the ring was 1 key with a red plastic cap. A manual override for a second fire door, a heavier one, steel, that lived recessed in the wall beside the service entrance. I had not known it existed. I do not think anyone without his 21 years in the building had known it existed. He reached the wall, he slotted the key, he turned it, and the fire door began its slow, hydraulic descent from the ceiling. It would take 11 seconds to close. 11 seconds was more than enough time for the things already through the service entrance to reach him. "Mr. Calderon." He did not turn. He did not shout. He stood under the descending door, and he held up his hand, flat, like a traffic cop, as if any of them would obey. And in a way, and this is the part I do not believe and still believe, they hesitated. They slowed. Not for his hand, for the certainty of him. For the 21 years he had spent being the man who managed hotels on bad nights. The door came down. He was still on our side of it. He was also not alone on our side of it. "Go," he said. He said it to us. He did not say it loudly. He said it the way he had said everything else, and it was the loudest thing he had said. We went. We went up 6 flights before anyone stopped to breathe. We went up to the 16th floor, to the roof access, to the stairwell's last door. And when I tried to count us in the red glow of the emergency light above the door, I got to 11, and then I got to 11 again. 11. The roof of the Meridian Grand was gravel and tar and the huge ribbed carapace of the HVAC system, and above it a sky in which the stars were visible for the first time in any of our lifetimes in that city. Because the city below had gone dark in pieces. I would not have believed the sky could look like that over a place I had lived in for 11 years. Orion was lying on his side over the harbor. The river to the east was a black seam in a black fabric. Fires had started. There were 4 I could see from the edge. One was the courthouse, which I recognized by the shape of its dome against the flames. One was farther out, in the warehouse district, a broad orange bloom. The other 2 were nearer and smaller, one in the financial quarter, one in what I thought was the theater row. None of them would be put out. There was no one left to put them out. Theo sat with his back against the HVAC unit, knees drawn up. He had not spoken since the sky bridge. His skateboard lay flat beside him. Rita and Vincent had taken the children to the lee side of the roof, where the wind was weaker, and were sitting together on a folded tarp with their daughters between them. Alida was sitting alone near the edge, her legs dangling over the drop. And I did not go to her because there are forms of solitude you do not interrupt. Rios was standing now, upright, at the stairwell door with his weapon drawn, and his eyes, for the first time all night, were not somewhere else. Marco gathered Diane and me and Nora at the far end of the roof, away from the others. "There's a fire escape on the north face," he said. "It drops into the alley off 8th. From the alley, it's 3 blocks to the waterfront. If we go now, while it's dark, we can make the river by dawn. There are boats at the marina." "How many can the escape take?" Diane said. 6, maybe 7, if we go one at a time and fast. The bottom section is a counterweight drop. It'll come down once and then it won't go back up." "We're 11, Nora said. "Right." He did not look at her. He was looking at me. "So we make choices." "What choices?" I said. "The ones we've been pretending we don't have to make since we walked into that hotel." Nora had heard the sentence before I had. I saw her back go straight. "Say it, Mr. Price." "The children go first," Marco said. "They go with their parents. That's 5. That leaves 2 more spots on the first descent, 3 if we're lucky. The rest of us come down after. But some of us won't. Because the fire escape is going to attract attention. And because whoever goes last is going to be climbing down in daylight, or in a crowd, or both." "And," I said. "And what?" "And there are people on this roof," Marco said, "who are going to slow the people behind them down. That's not a moral judgment. That's a mechanical fact. The fire escape has rungs. Rungs require hands that grip." No one spoke for a long time. The wind lifted the corner of a tarp somewhere behind us and let it down. "Mr. Price," Nora said, in a voice that had become suddenly, peacefully, very clear. You are speaking about me. Marco finally looked at her. I'm speaking about triage. Elliot, Nora said. She did not turn to me. Elliot, I want you to listen very carefully. If Mr. Price is right, that the escape has a mechanical limit, and he is a man who knows his machines, then I would prefer to spend what I have left on the roof. I would like to stay. I would like to stay with whichever of you is the last to climb down. I'll stay with her, Theo said, from across the roof. He had heard every word. Theo, no, I said. I'll stay with her, Theo said again, as if repetition were the only argument left to him. He was standing now. The skateboard hung from his hand by one hand the way a child holds a favorite toy that has stopped being quite enough to fix a situation. Somebody's got to be the last one. Somebody's going to have to kick the ladder loose. It'll be easier if it's someone young. Who's fast? Son, Marco said. That's not. Don't call me son. Theo's voice cracked. It was the first crack I had heard in him, and it was not a crack of fear. It was a crack of fury. You don't get to call me son and then tell me who gets to live. Pick one. Marco picked the other. Fine, he said. He said it quietly. He said it the way men say things they are secretly grateful to have had chosen for them. We move in 10 minutes. It did not take 10 minutes. It took 40. Rita refused to go without Vincent. Vincent refused to go before Rita. Sophie refused to be carried. And then, when she saw the first rung of the fire escape and the drop beneath it, accepted being carried, Mira slept through all of it with the boneless faith of 3-year-olds. Aleida, who had not spoken for an hour, came down to us from the edge and said simply, I'll go second to last. I've been sitting long enough. Rios went first, because Rios had the weapon, because whoever met the bottom of the alley would need to meet it armed. Then Rita, then Sophie on Rita's back, then Vincent with Mira, then Diane, then Aleida, then Marco, who looked at Nora once before he swung over the parapet and did not say goodbye, because he had already said, by descending, the only thing he had in him to say. That left me and Nora and Theo on the roof. The plan was this. I would go next. Theo would kick the ladder's release bar when I was clear, so it could not be climbed by anything following us. He and Nora would. We had not finished the sentence. The sentence did not have a finish. The sentence had a shape that we all understood, and none of us had the courage to articulate. I was halfway over the parapet when Theo said, Elliot. I looked at him. You have to do something for me when you get down there. Anything? Tell my mom her name was in my phone. Tell her it still is. Tell her I was trying to get home. Theo. Please. I'll tell her, I said. I promise. Nora was watching us. Her eyes had a shine I did not understand. She put her hand against the side of Theo's face briefly. She said something to him so quietly I did not hear it. Theo nodded. I went over the parapet. I am not going to describe the climb. Climbs in the dark are never worth describing. They are only worth surviving. I reached the last rung. I hung from it. I dropped the final 8 feet into the alley. And I landed on my side and did not get up for 3 seconds, because my lungs had forgotten how to be lungs. When I looked up, I saw 2 things. I saw the rest of our group crouched against the dumpster at the mouth of the alley, waving at me to come. I saw, on the parapet above, Theo and Nora still standing. Theo did not kick the release. He swung his legs over. He climbed down. Behind him, Nora climbed down too. She was faster than I had ever seen her. She moved the way people move when they have decided that the shape of their life is no longer a thing to be protected. She met Theo at the bottom of the last section, and the 2 of them dropped into the alley together. And Theo was the one who turned, and looked up and kicked the counterweight release hard with the heel of his foot. And the ladder went up with a rusted scream. You, Marco said from the dumpster. You stupid. Shut up, Theo said. We ran. 3 blocks sounds like nothing. 3 blocks, on a normal night, was the distance between my apartment and the bodega that sold the bread I liked. 3 blocks. That night, through an alley and a cross street and a parking lot and a plaza, was the longest walk any of us would take in our lives. We did not talk. We did not take a straight route. Marco led. He knew the backs of the buildings the way he had known the station. And we slid along service corridors and loading docks and the black mouths of parking ramps, moving when he moved, stopping when he stopped. The things in the street did not see us often. When they did, Rios was ready. And he was accurate, and he did not speak. Theo fell at the crossing of 7th and Harbor. He did not cry out. He simply went down, his legs folding, his shoulder hitting the asphalt, his skateboard clattering ahead of him in the dark. Nora went down beside him. So did Diane. So did I. Theo, 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 look at me. His mouth was moving. His eyes were bright the way Hassan's had been bright. Something was already wrong. The left sleeve of his hoodie was dark, soaked, and the dark stopped at his wrist, and along his wrist in a neat half moon was an imprint I did not have the vocabulary for. When? I said. The alley, he whispered. When I dropped. I put my hand down. There had been one of them lying against the dumpster. I had not seen it in the dark. None of us had seen it. Theo had come down on top of it with his hand out. Okay, I said. Okay. Elliot. Theo, listen. Tell her, he said. Tell my mom, you promised. I'll tell her. I'll tell her everything. He said, it doesn't hurt. That's weird. I thought it would hurt. Then he said, Nora. And Nora was already there, her hand on the side of his face the way it had been on the roof. And Theo closed his eyes, and the boy I had known for 7 hours was gone before Marco finished counting the seconds out to us under his breath. We have to move, Marco said. 1 minute, Diane said. We don't have a minute. 1 minute, Marco. He gave us 30 seconds. When I stood, I realized Nora was shaking. Not crying, shaking. She was holding her left forearm with her right hand, and when she lifted her hand away, there was blood on her palm. Nora, I said. On the roof, she said. When I came over the wall, there was a... On the wall. I did not say, Nora. It is not deep, Elliot. It is only a scratch. Diane was already looking at me over Nora's shoulder, and her face was a thing I would carry forever. Let me walk, Nora said. Let me walk until I cannot walk. I would like to see the water. We walked. We made the harbor at the pale edge of dawn. We came out between 2 warehouses onto a pier, and at the end of the pier, a man in a blue jacket was standing by a white boat with a green stripe, shouting at people through a bullhorn. We did not shout back. We approached slowly. We counted ourselves in the gray light. 10. We had started as 12. Mr. Calderon had been 1. Theo had been the other. Hassan had been before we ever counted. Nora sat down on a bollard halfway up the pier. She said, I will not get in the boat. Nora. Elliot, I will not get in the boat, and I will not ask any of you to do what needs to be done, and I will not argue with any of you about it. I will sit here. I would like you, please, to go. Diane put her hand on my shoulder. Diane said very softly, Elliot, I'll stay with her a minute. Nora smiled at her. I will not write what was in that smile. I went to the boat. The man in the blue jacket was a harbor police sergeant named Morales, and his boat could take 8. We were 10 at the pier. We were 9 now, with Nora on the bollard and Diane still with her. Rita and Vincent and the children went first, as Mr. Calderon would have said go first. Then Aleida, then Rios, then Marco, then me. Morales was counting. 8, Morales said. 8 is my number. I am sorry. I am so sorry. 8. Diane was walking up the pier toward us. Alone. I looked at her. She nodded once. She did not speak. Marco was already halfway down the boarding ladder into the boat. He turned, looked at Diane, looked at me, looked at Morales, looked at the pier behind Diane, at the distance, at the bollard now empty. 7, Marco said. Excuse me. You have 7. Marco climbed back up onto the pier. I'm staying. Morales stared at him. Rios stared at him. Even Sophie, 6 years old, already awake enough to count adults, stared at him. Price, Rios said. Get in the boat. I'm not getting in the boat. Marco, Diane said. There's a refinery 14 miles north, Marco said. I know someone who works the gate there. If anyone else made it out of Meridian. And they'll be going that way. Somebody has to." He was not looking at any of us when he said it. He was looking at the bollard. I don't do well on water. I never have. I believed him about the water. I did not believe him about the refinery. I believed, watching him, that Marco had decided to pay a bill he had carried for longer than any of us knew, and that the bill had Hassan's name on it, and Theo's, and possibly older names we would never learn. He shook my hand. He shook Diane's hand. He did not shake Rios's. He nodded once at Morales. He walked back up the pier past the empty bollard, and he did not look back. And he did not slow down. And somewhere between the pier and the warehouses, he became a figure, and then a shape, and then nothing. 7, Morales said. His voice was different now. Board. We boarded. Morales untied. The engine caught. The boat pulled away from the pier, slow at first, then opening up as the harbor widened, and the city behind us began to sort itself into silhouette against the pale dawn. Diane sat beside me on the bench. Sophie sat on Rita's lap. Mira slept against her mother's shoulder. Aleida stood at the rail, hands gripping the metal, her hair moving in the wind off the water. Rios sat with his back to the city, which was the only direction he could bear to face. I looked back once. I want to say I did not. The Meridian Grand was still burning on its upper floors, though I had not seen it burning when we left. The courthouse dome was gone. A smaller fire that had been in the theater row had stretched into something larger and darker. The skyline I had measured for a living, the skyline whose edges and setbacks and cornices I had climbed and charted and reduced to drawings, was a skyline I no longer recognized. It was not my city. It had not been my city since the 1152 pulled out of Meridian Station with a distracted conductor in its window. Diane took my hand. Elliot. Yes. You kept your promise. You'll tell his mother. I will. And when you do, you tell her he didn't kick the ladder. You tell her he climbed down for an old woman he had known for one night. You tell her everything. I'll tell her everything. The wind off the river was cold. And it was cold in a way I had not felt all evening. As if the wind had been waiting for us, to be far enough from the fires to let us notice it. Sophie, in her mother's arms, turned her head and looked back at the city I could not stop looking at. And then she looked up at me. "Mister," she said. "Is it over?" I did not know what to tell her. I did not know what was true. I did not know what a child that age could be told, and then carry for the rest of her life, without the telling becoming the thing that broke her. "No," I said finally. "It's not over. But you are. You are." She considered that. She nodded, the slow consenting nod of children who accept the distinction between themselves and the world without understanding it. Then she laid her head against her mother's collarbone and, in the unfair way children always had, went to sleep. Morales steered the boat up the river in the thin blue before sunrise. He did not speak except to say once, "Keep low at the Belmont Bridge," because there were things on the Belmont Bridge. And we did keep low, and we passed under it. And the things on the bridge did not see us. And above us, one of them was slowly, indifferently, walking off the edge into the water. And then another, and then another, as if the bridge were a conveyor they had boarded by mistake. The sun came up over the ridge an hour later. Morales turned the boat into a cove I did not know. A narrow inlet below a bluff where a single dock was lit by a pair of battery lanterns. A Coast Guard cutter sat at the end of the dock, and on the deck of the cutter a woman in uniform was waving us in. The water was flat here. The air smelled of pine. I had lived 11 years in a city with a river, and had not known this inlet existed. Rita and Vincent got off the boat holding their daughters. Aleida got off the boat and sat down on the dock and put her head on her knees and breathed. Rios got off the boat without looking back and walked to the uniformed woman and said his name and his precinct number and his badge number as if he were reporting for a shift. Morales got off the boat and did not say goodbye to any of us. I am told he went back out twice for other boats. I am told the second time he did not come back. Diane and I stood on the dock a long time. "Where do we go now?" I said. "Anywhere," she said. "Anywhere is a lot of places." "Then we'll pick one." Behind us, the boat rocked against its lines. Ahead of us, the dock ran up into a path, and the path ran up into trees, and the trees were the simplest, quietest thing I had seen in 12 hours. And I had an absurd urge to sit down and thank them, one at a time, for being alive and indifferent and rooted. "Elliot," Diane said, "what I said earlier, about doing something different. I remember. I meant it. I know. I don't know what it is yet. You don't have to." She looked at me for a long moment. Then she put her forehead against my shoulder and stood there. And I did not put my arm around her, not because I did not want to, but because I understood that what she needed was the shoulder, and nothing more and nothing less. Somewhere upriver, we heard the small, distant echo of a siren. It was the first siren I had heard in 4 hours that I believed was answered. The uniformed woman on the cutter called our names one at a time. We went up the dock. We went up the path. The woman wrote our names in a notebook. She asked each of us for a next of kin. I gave her my sister's name in Colorado, and my sister's husband, and a number that I was not sure was still current. Diane gave her an address in Oakland, her mother's, and nothing else. When it was Nora's name the woman asked for, because I had said Nora's name, because I had needed to say Nora's name. The woman paused her pen and looked up at me. "We will enter her," she said quietly. "We will enter her." And she did. We walked up into the trees, and behind us the river kept moving. And behind the river, the city kept burning. And neither of them were ours anymore. I am writing this 6 months later, from a farmhouse that is not mine, in a valley that is not the one I grew up in, for a boy's mother whose name I did not know when I made him a promise. I kept the promise. I found her. I sat across a kitchen table from her, and I told her about her son for 3 hours. I told her about the skateboard. I told her about the old woman. I told her that her name had been on his phone, and that it still was. I told her he had not kicked the ladder. She cried for a long time. Then she made me eat. I do not sleep well. Diane does not either. Sometimes late, we sit on the porch and count the stars, which we did not know how to see before. I think about the train I did not catch almost every day. I have decided, finally, that it was neither luck nor cruelty. It was a minute. It was a woman on a bench. It was the smallest thing I've ever done, and the whole of my life has since become the thing that followed it. I am still here. I am different. I am writing this down. If you enjoy our stories, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell button. Thank you.